I found the blueprints by accident, folded under the passenger seat of my wife's car. Our house. Every room drawn clean and neat, except one. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. And before you think this is some wild crime show nonsense, let me tell you something straight. Nothing in this story started dramatic. It started ordinary. Boring even. That's what makes it stick with you. That's what makes it hurt. The room with the big red X? That was my home office. The place where I worked every single day. The place I thought was mine. Now, this happened about 3 years back, on a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday I'd lived through for the last decade. Same morning routine. Same coffee mug. Same knot in my lower back that told me I wasn't 30 anymore. I was 46, married 15 years, living in a quiet subdivision where the loudest thing most nights was a neighbor's dog barking at raccoons. Nothing about my life screamed danger. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I was just looking for my damn sunglasses. My wife, Sarah, had borrowed my car the week before, so I figured mine had ended up in hers. Her sedan was parked in the driveway, still warm from the afternoon sun. I remember the smell when I opened the door, leather, vanilla air freshener, a faint trace of her perfume. Familiar. Safe. I bent down, reached under the seat, expecting dust bunnies and old receipts. Instead, my fingers hit paper. Thick paper. Crisp edges. Folded tight. At first, I didn't even pull it all the way out. I thought maybe it was a takeout menu or some contractor flyer she'd grabbed at the grocery store. We talked about replacing the deck, after all. But when I unfolded it on the hood of the car, I knew immediately. Blueprints aren't something you mistake for anything else. Lines, measurements, labels, clean, professional work. And there it was, right at the top. Our address. I remember chuckling at first. A small, confused laugh. Like my brain was trying to make it harmless. Maybe Sarah was planning a surprise renovation. Maybe she'd finally listened when I talked about knocking down that wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Then I saw the red ink. Every room was outlined in black. Living room, kitchen, bedrooms, garage, even the damn linen closet. But one room had been circled hard, like someone pressed the pen down with anger. A big red X slashed across it, corner to corner. And in the margin, written in tight handwriting I didn't recognize at first, were notes. Primary focus. Access points. Sound containment. Confirm schedule. My office. The room I spent 8 to 10 hours a day in. The room where I paid our bills. The room where I thought I was alone. I stood there a long time, folks. Longer than I care to admit. The paper fluttering slightly in the breeze. My heart doing that slow, heavy thump that tells you something inside your life just cracked. I didn't panic. Not yet. I didn't jump to conclusions. I folded the blueprints back up carefully, put them right where I found them, slid them under the seat again, like they'd never moved. Then I sat in my own driveway, hands on my knees, staring at the garage door like it might explain things if I stared hard enough. That was the moment, the exact second my life split into before and after. Because once you see something like that, something that doesn't belong, you don't unsee it. You carry it with you. Into the house. Into dinner. Into bed. And from that moment on, every quiet second started to feel loud. Before those blueprints ever showed up under the seat of Sarah's car, my life was steady. Not exciting. Not flashy. But solid in the way a good house is solid. Maybe a few creaks at night, but nothing you lose sleep over. Sarah and I had built a rhythm over 15 years. Morning coffee together at the kitchen counter. Me reading the news on my tablet. Her scrolling through recipes she never quite got around to cooking. A quick kiss before I retreated down the hall to my home office, and she headed out to work at the clinic. Evenings were predictable. Dinner, a show we half-watched, quiet conversation that didn't demand too much energy from either of us. And I liked it that way. My office was my anchor. A modest room at the back of the house, with a desk I'd refinished myself, a bookshelf sagging under old manuals and family photos, and a window that looked out onto the yard. That room paid our mortgage. That room sent our daughter through college. That room was where I felt useful, respected, and calm. Sarah respected it too. Or at least, I thought she did. She never barged in during work hours. Always knocked. Always asked if I was on a call. Sometimes she'd bring me a sandwich and set it down quietly, like I was something fragile that might break if startled. Looking back, that tenderness feels different now. But back then, it felt like love. We weren't perfect, folks. No marriages. There were small disagreements about money, about time, about how often we visited her sister. Normal stuff. We'd learned to argue softly, to let things cool before they burned. I took pride in that. I thought it meant we were mature. Inside, I felt settled. Not euphoric. Settled. Like a man who believed he knew where he stood in the world and who stood beside him. Our house reflected that belief. Family photos on the walls. Shoes kicked off by the door. A fridge cluttered with magnets and reminders. Nothing secret. Nothing hidden. At least, that's what I told myself. Because when you live inside a routine long enough, you stop questioning it. You stop examining the little changes. The pauses, the looks that don't last quite as long as they used to. Sarah had grown quieter over the last year. Not cold, just distracted. She took more calls outside, started running errands later in the evening, claimed new projects at work she didn't elaborate on. When I asked, she'd smile and say, "Just busy, Mickle. You know how it is." And I didn't know how it was. Or I thought I did. There were nights she went to bed earlier than me. Phone tucked close to her chest. Mornings she woke up already dressed, already somewhere else mentally. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I didn't press. Men my age are experts at swallowing questions. We call it trust. We call it respect. Sometimes, if we're honest, we call it fear. Fear of discovering something we're not ready to face. Now, let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because that feeling, I had it. Small, quiet, easy to dismiss. Like a pebble in your shoe, you keep telling yourself you'll shake out later. The day I found the blueprints hadn't started strange. Sarah kissed me goodbye that morning. Asked if I'd pick up milk on my way back from the store. Normal. Easy. But as she drove away, I remember watching her through the window a second longer than usual. Not because I suspected her, but because something in me hesitated. Like my instincts had brushed against a truth my mind wasn't ready to hear. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, started my workday, and for the first time in years, my office didn't feel quite as safe. Just watched. That feeling sat with me all day, followed me into the afternoon. And when I walked out to her car looking for my sunglasses, it was already waiting for me. I just didn't know yet how deep it went. I didn't confront Sarah that night. I want to be honest about that, because people like to imagine they'd act fast, strong, decisive. But when the ground shifts under your feet, most of us don't sprint, we freeze. We test the floor with one foot and pretend nothing's wrong. So that evening, I made dinner like always. Grilled chicken, steamed vegetables. The kind of meal you make when you're not trying to impress anyone. Just keep the machine running. Sarah came home late, apologized in that soft, practiced way, and thanked me for cooking. I watched her hands as she ate. Steady. No tremble. No guilt leaking through the cracks. And that scared me more than if she'd looked nervous. Over the next few days, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. Not obsessively. Quietly. Like a man listening through a wall, trying to decide if the sound he hears is dangerous or just the house settling. Sarah took her phone everywhere. Bathroom, laundry room, even outside to check the mail. She'd angle the screen away from me, not dramatically, just enough to notice if you were already looking. Her schedule changed again. She said the clinic had switched her hours. I nodded, asked no follow-up questions, but I started keeping mental notes. Times. Excuses, gaps that didn't quite line up, and my office started to feel different. I couldn't explain it at first. It wasn't anything obvious. No missing files, no moved furniture, but I noticed the door wasn't always closed the way I left it. My chair would be angled slightly off, the trash bin fuller than it should have been. Once, I found a faint scuff on the baseboard, like something heavy had been moved and pushed back. I told myself it was nothing. Cleaning. Airflow, imagination, but every emotional beat seemed to come with a small discovery, and they were stacking up. One afternoon, I checked our home router logs. Not because I suspected anything criminal, but because curiosity had grown teeth. I saw unfamiliar devices connecting during hours I was supposedly alone. Names I didn't recognize. Connections that dropped the moment I came home from errands. I felt my chest tighten, just a little. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I started doing something I'd never done in my marriage. I waited. I waited for inconsistencies, for slips, for something solid enough that I couldn't explain it away with optimism and love. Because once you accuse someone you love, there's no rewind button. Then came the noise. Late one afternoon, I was at the grocery store when I realized I'd left my wallet at home. I turned back early, pulled into the driveway 20 minutes before I should have been there. As I stepped inside, I heard it, a muffled thud, from the back of the house. My office. It wasn't loud, just wrong, like furniture settling under weight. I froze in the hallway, groceries in my hands, heart doing that slow, deliberate pounding again. "Sarah," I called out. Silence. Then footsteps. Quick, measured, the sound of a door opening and closing. She appeared from the hallway smiling too fast. Asked why I was home early. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flicked past me, toward the office. I shrugged, held up the grocery bag, made a joke about forgetting my wallet. She laughed. Too quickly. And that was it. That was the moment my instincts stopped whispering and started speaking clearly. Something was happening in that room. Something planned. Something intentional. And whatever it was, it involved my absence. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing. I didn't feel anger yet, or fear. I felt alert, like a man who finally realizes he's not alone in the dark. Folks, pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted her right then? Or would you have waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I'm curious what you would have chosen, because my choice, the one I made next, set everything else in motion. And there was no turning back after that. Once you decide to look for the truth, it has a way of stepping forward to meet you. I didn't install hidden cameras. I didn't hire a private investigator. This wasn't some clever spy game. It was slower than that, more painful. I simply stopped assuming innocence and started observing reality as it was. The first real break came on a Thursday. Sarah said she'd be working a double shift. Texted me around noon with a heart emoji and a reminder to eat lunch. That message alone would have reassured me a week earlier. Now it felt rehearsed. I waited an hour after she left. Then I did something that still makes my stomach turn when I think about it. I checked her car again. This time, I didn't pretend I was looking for sunglasses. I pulled the blueprints out fully, spread them across the hood, studied every line, every notation. That handwriting in the margins, it wasn't Sarah's. I'd seen her write grocery lists and birthday cards for 15 years. This was tighter, more technical, confident in a way that didn't belong to her. And then I noticed something I'd missed the first time. A logo in the corner. Small. Faded. A local contracting firm. I looked them up. Their website showed commercial remodeling, soundproofing, structural modifications, discrete projects handled professionally. My chest felt hollow. I went inside and locked myself in my office, the very room marked with a red X, and I just sat there, listened to the hum of my computer, the distant sound of traffic, trying to convince myself this still wasn't what it looked like. That's when I checked events. I don't know why. Call it instinct. Call it paranoia. But I stood on my chair and shined my phone flashlight into the ceiling vent. There was fresh metal, new screws, too clean to be old. I climbed down slowly, like my body already knew something my mind hadn't accepted yet. Next came the router logs again. This time, I cross-checked the device IDs. One of them matched a phone that wasn't mine, or Sarah's. It connected almost exclusively when I was gone, always during work hours, always from my office. I felt sick, but still the part of me held on to denial, because the truth, when it finally arrived, was going to tear everything open. That evening, I waited in my car instead of coming inside. I parked down the street and watched my own house like a stranger. Lights came on. Shadows moved. And then, right on schedule, someone arrived. A man, mid-30s, confident walk, Parked 2 houses down like he'd done this before. He didn't knock. Sarah opened the door for him. They didn't kiss. Not immediately. They stepped inside like this was routine. Like my home had been reclassified without my knowledge. I stayed in the car longer than I should have. Long enough for reality to sink its teeth in. Long enough for my hands to stop shaking and go completely numb. When I finally went inside, they were in my office. The door was closed. I stood in the hallway listening to muffled voices. Low laughter. The scrape of my desk chair moving. That was the worst part. Hearing someone else claim space you built your life in. I opened the door. They jumped apart like guilty children. Sarah's face drained of color. The man reached for his jacket, stammering something I didn't hear. I didn't yell. I didn't swing. I just looked around the room. The vent. The repositioned furniture. The faint outlines on the wall where something had been mounted and removed. My office had been altered to suit someone else's needs. And Sarah, she didn't deny it. She cried. Apologized. Said it just happened. Said she felt lonely. Said the office was the only place he could come without suspicion. That was the moment something broke cleanly inside me. Not cracked. Not wounded. Broken. I need you to understand something here. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life crumbling. Have you ever been blindsided like this? Someone you trusted completely. Just destroying everything? Share your story below if you've been there. Let's heal together. I told the man to leave. He didn't argue. Sarah followed him with her eyes, like she'd lost something valuable. I stood alone in that room long after they were gone, surrounded by the evidence, by the silence, by the truth. My marriage hadn't just ended. It had been planned around my absence. And that red X on the blueprint? That wasn't a warning. It was a target. After the door closed behind that man, the house went quiet in a way I'd never heard before. Not peaceful. Empty. Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, crying into her hands. The sound barely registered. I was still standing in my office, staring at the wall where my diplomas used to hang, noticing the faint rectangles of cleaner paint where something else had been mounted. Hooks. Panels. God knows what else. I didn't ask questions that night. Not because I didn't want answers, but because answers wouldn't change what I'd already seen. There's a point where explanation becomes insult, where words are just noise trying to cover the truth. I slept in the guest room. Didn't lock the door. Didn't need to. Nothing left to protect. The next morning, I woke up calm. That surprised me. No rage. No tears. Just clarity. The kind that settles in after the storm has already done its damage. I made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table. Watched Sarah hover like a ghost, unsure whether to speak. I told her I needed time. Told her not to contact me unless it was necessary. Told her we'd talk later. She nodded too fast. Agreed too easily. That told me everything I needed to know. Over the next week, I shifted into a version of myself I hadn't met before. Quiet. Methodical. Focused. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I planned. First thing I did was document everything. Photos of the vents, the router logs, the blueprints, the contractor logo. I backed everything up twice. Once on a hard drive, once in the cloud. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because control starts with information. Then I called a lawyer. I didn't say affair at first. I said marital concerns. But by the end of the call, the word betrayal was sitting between us like a fact, not an emotion. He told me what mattered. Evidence. Timeline. Assets. He told me what didn't. Apologies. Promises. Tears. I listened. At night I reflected. Not on what she'd done, but on who I'd been. The man who trusted without verifying. The man who mistook comfort for safety. I didn't hate that man, but I understood now that he couldn't survive what came next. Sarah tried to talk. Tried to explain. Said she'd end it. Said it meant nothing. That almost made me laugh. If it meant nothing, it wouldn't have blueprints. If it meant nothing, it wouldn't have planning notes. If it meant nothing, it wouldn't have turned my office into a shared secret. I told her we were done. Not dramatically. Just firmly. Like closing a door you know you won't open again. And then something inside me shifted. Not toward violence. Not toward cruelty. Toward justice. See, folks, Revenge isn't always about screaming or breaking things. Sometimes it's about letting the truth walk into the room on its own legs and take a seat where everyone can see it. I didn't want to humiliate her. I wanted the lie to collapse under its own weight. So I set the stage. I scheduled a meeting, invited her parents, our daughter, a couple of close friends, told them it was about big changes. I kept my voice steady, neutral. Sarah thought I was bluffing, thought I was still processing. She even thanked me for being calm. That was the moment I knew she still didn't understand who she was dealing with now. By the time the date was set, I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. Here's where I made my choice. Now I want to know, do you believe in revenge, or do you believe in walking away? What's the right move when someone destroys your trust? Comment below. I want to hear both sides. Because the next step wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. And once truth steps into the light, it doesn't need help doing damage. The day of the meeting arrived faster than I expected. Saturday afternoon. Clear sky. Windows open. The kind of day that feels wrong for endings. People started arriving just after 2. Her parents first, smiling politely, carrying pastries. Our daughter next, confused but trusting. A couple friends followed. The kind who'd shared dinners and holidays with us for years. Sarah hovered near the kitchen, nervous but composed. She kept glancing at me like she was waiting for a cue, a signal that this was all still manageable. I gave her nothing. We sat in the living room. Small talk floated around like dust. Weather, traffic, work. Normal words try and pretend this was a normal gathering. I stood once everyone was settled. Didn't clear my throat. Didn't pace. I held the blueprints in my hands. Folded. Calm. I asked you all here because there are changes coming. I said. My voice didn't shake. And I don't believe in letting people I love live inside a lie. Sarah's head snapped up. I unfolded the papers slowly. Let them hang in the air where everyone could see the red X. Her mother leaned forward, squinting. Her father frowned. This is our house, I continued. These were found in Sarah's car. Professionally drafted. Detailed. One room marked for special use. I turned the page, so the notes were visible. Access points. Schedule. Sound containment. Silence. You could feel the air tighten. That room, I said, pointing without drama, is my office. Sarah stood up then, told me to stop, said this wasn't the place. I looked at her once, just once. You made it the place, I said. I laid out the rest quickly. No storytelling, just facts. The unfamiliar devices on the router, the contractor, the altered vents, the man who visited while I was gone. I didn't name him, didn't need to. Her father's face went red. Her mother started crying. Our daughter stared at the floor, hands clenched, breathing shallow. Sarah tried to speak again. Apologies, explanations, words spilling over each other. I raised my hand. This isn't a trial, I said. It's an ending. I told them the marriage was over, that I'd already spoken to a lawyer, that the house would be sold, that I was done negotiating reality. No shouting, no insults, just finality. And this is the moment everything changed. Tell me, are you rooting for me right now? Or do you think I went too far? Be honest in the comments. Uncle Mickle can take it. Sarah collapsed onto the couch like her legs had given out. Her mother went to her, but it was different now. Protective, yes, but no longer unquestioning. The lie had lost its armor. People left quietly. Awkward hugs. Avoided eye contact. No one blamed me. That mattered more than I expected. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, Sarah looked up at me through swollen eyes. You didn't have to do it like that, she said. I nodded. You didn't have to plan it like you did. That was the last real conversation we had. She moved out within the week. I reclaimed my office the same day she left. Took down the altered vent, patched the walls, rearranged the furniture exactly the way it had been before. But it didn't feel the same. It felt neutral, like a place that had survived something. I sat at my desk that evening, alone, watching the sun go down through the window. No victory, no thrill, just a steady sense that I had protected something important. Not my marriage, my dignity. And once you reclaim that, Folks, everything else becomes negotiable. The weeks after she moved out were quieter than I expected. Not the heavy, suffocating silence people warn you about, but a softer one. Like the house itself was exhaling after holding its breath for years. I sold the dining table first. Too many memories anchored to that wood. Then the couch. Then half the kitchenware we'd collected over a lifetime of someday plans. The house went on the market in early spring. Watching strangers walk through your home is a strange thing. They open closets, peek into corners, comment on light and space like the past never happened there. I stood in my office during every showing, hands in my pockets, grounding myself. That room stayed with me until the very end. The divorce wasn't dramatic. Paperwork, meetings, signatures. Sarah cried sometimes. I didn't. Not because I was strong, but because I'd already cried the tears that mattered. The rest would have just been habit. Our daughter took it the hardest. She asked me once if I hated her mother. I told her no. That hate takes energy better spent rebuilding. That some people don't break because they're evil. They break because they're empty. She nodded like she understood. I'm not sure she did, but she will. I moved into a smaller place across town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. A clean start that didn't pretend to be anything else. I set up a new office by the window. Different desk, different chair, same work. The first day I sat down to do my job again, really do it, I felt something unexpected. Peace. No watching the clock. No listening for footsteps. No wondering who might enter when my back was turned. Just me and the quiet. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the man Sarah had chosen. Wondered if he knew what he'd stepped into. Or if he'd just been another room marked with an X in someone else's plans. But those thoughts faded. Life doesn't rush back in after betrayal. It tiptoes. It tests the floor. It asks if you're ready before it commits. And slowly I was. I cooked again. For myself. Better meals this time. I started walking in the mornings. Reconnected with friends I'd drifted from without realizing it. I learned how much of myself I'd tucked away to keep a peace that wasn't real. And my office, it became just a room again. Not a symbol. Not a wound. Just a place where a man did honest work and told himself the truth. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it all the same way again. What about you? If you could go back and handle your worst betrayal differently, would you? Or was the pain necessary to become who you are now? Let me know below. Because here's the thing folks don't tell you. Closure doesn't come from winning. It comes from standing in the wreckage and deciding what parts of yourself you're willing to carry forward. I carried the parts that mattered. Respect, calm, self-trust. And when I finally slept through the night again, without dreams of red X's or locked doors, I knew something important had shifted. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. And that realization carried me into the last chapter of this story. Time is a way of sanding down the sharpest edges. Not erasing them, just smoothing them enough that you can touch the memory without bleeding. It's been a while now since I found those blueprints. Long enough that the red X doesn't flash in my mind anymore when I close my eyes. Long enough that my office is just a room again, not a crime scene in my head. What stayed with me wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the lesson underneath it. See, most of us think trust is about believing someone else won't hurt us. But real trust, the kind that keeps you standing, is about believing yourself. Believing you'll notice when something's wrong. Believing you'll act when the truth shows up. Believing you won't abandon yourself just to keep a fragile piece intact. I didn't win anything by exposing the lie. I didn't lose anything by ending the marriage. What I gained was clarity. I learned that love without honesty isn't love, it's maintenance. And maintenance gets exhausting when you're the only one doing the work. If you're listening to this right now and something in your life feels off, not dramatic, not explosive, just quietly wrong, don't ignore that feeling. You don't have to accuse. You don't have to spy. You don't even have to act immediately. Just don't lie to yourself. Because the moment you stop doing that, you're already halfway out of the dark. So here's my final question for you. And I really want to hear your thoughts. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. We all carry different scars. We all heal at different speeds. But every one of us deserves a life where the rooms we work, love, and rest in a truly our own. No hidden plans, no red X's, no pretending, just truth. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. And remember this, the strongest thing a man can do after betrayal isn't revenge or forgiveness. It's choosing himself without apology.